This censored photo of an Old West saloon revealed something no one had noticed in 140 years. Dr. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her reading glasses and leaned closer to the computer screen in the dimly lit archives of the Denver Historical Society. Outside, rain drummed against the windows of the old brick building, but inside, surrounded by boxes of century-old documents, she felt transported to another time entirely. "Another late night, Sarah?" called Tom, the security guard, passing by her office door. "Just one more hour," she promised, not looking up from the digitized photograph on her monitor. "I'm cataloging the Hastings collection." Tom chuckled. "That's what you said 3 hours ago." She smiled but didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on a photograph dated 1885, taken inside the Silver Dollar Saloon in Deadwood, South Dakota. The image showed a typical scene: cowboys at the bar, a piano player in the corner, bartenders serving whiskey. Someone had placed a black censorship bar across a portion of the image decades ago, presumably to hide something deemed inappropriate for public viewing. Sarah had seen hundreds of censored photographs from the Victorian era. Usually, they concealed gambling tables, scantily dressed women, or violence, standard practice for the puritanical sensibilities of early archivists. But something about this particular photograph bothered her. She zoomed in on the image, studying the faces of the men at the bar. Their clothing was authentic: worn leather vests, dusty hats, gun belts slung low on their hips. The saloon's interior matched every other establishment she'd studied from that period. Rough wooden floors, oil lamps hanging from the ceiling, a long mirror behind the bar reflecting bottles of whiskey. Yet her historian's instinct, honed over 15 years of research, told her something was wrong. Sarah reached for her coffee, now cold, and took a sip without tasting it. She clicked through the metadata file attached to the photograph. Photographer, James Whitmore. Location, Silver Dollar Saloon, Deadwood, South Dakota. Date, September 14th, 1885. Subject, interior scene, patrons at leisure. And then, in handwriting added decades later, section censored by order of Historical Committee, 1923. Reason, sensitive material. "Sensitive material," Sarah murmured. "What were you hiding?" Sarah clicked on the image enhancement tool, a sophisticated program the Historical Society had recently acquired. She'd been trained to use it carefully. Too much digital manipulation could create false details or destroy authentic information embedded in old photographs. She selected the censored area and began the painstaking process of removing the digital overlay that had been added when the photograph was scanned. The original censor bar had been physical, black ink painted directly onto the photograph itself, but the scanning process had added a second layer of digital obscuration. As the program worked, Sarah's mind wandered to the history of Deadwood in 1885. Wild Bill Hickok had been shot there 9 years earlier. The town was still rough, still dangerous, filled with miners seeking gold and gamblers seeking their fortunes. Violence was common. Photography was rare. The computer chimed softly. The enhancement was complete. Sarah leaned forward, squinting at what the program had revealed beneath the censor bar. Her breath caught in her throat. The censored portion showed a corner table where 3 men sat playing cards. That alone wasn't unusual. But one of the men, a lean figure wearing a distinctive brocade vest and holding cards close to his chest, had a face that Sarah recognized immediately from hundreds of other photographs. "That's impossible," she whispered. She grabbed her phone and pulled up a reference image she'd saved months ago during a completely different research project. She held it next to her monitor, comparing. The man in the saloon photograph was identical. Same sharp features, same distinctive vest, same piercing gaze, to a man who, according to every historical record, every newspaper account, every official document, had died 6 months earlier in a shootout 300 miles away in Dodge City, Kansas. Sarah's hands began to tremble as she reached for her notepad. The man sitting at that card table, very much alive on September 14th, 1885, was supposed to be dead. She scribbled the name with shaking hands. John Wesley Cooper, reported killed, March 8th, 1885, Dodge City. But there he sat, playing cards in Deadwood 6 months after his supposed death. Sarah didn't sleep that night. By dawn, her office was covered in printed documents. Reference books lay open across every surface, and her computer displayed 17 different browser tabs. She'd pulled everything she could find on John Wesley Cooper. Born in Missouri, 1851, moved west in 1872. Known associate of several notorious outlaws but never formally charged with any crime. Worked as a card dealer, occasional bounty hunter, and, according to some accounts, an informant for federal marshals. A man who lived in the gray areas of frontier law. And according to the official record, he died on March 8, 1885. Sarah read the newspaper account from the Dodge City Times for the third time. Shootout at the Long Branch Saloon resulted in the death of John Wesley Cooper, age 34, killed by unknown assailant. Cooper was struck twice in the chest and died at the scene. Body identified by Marshal Thomas Kane. Buried at Boot Hill Cemetery, March 10, 1885. The article included an interview with Marshal Kane, who described finding Cooper's body and identifying him by his distinctive brocade vest and a scar above his left eyebrow. Sarah zoomed in on the deadwood photograph again, focusing on the man at the card table. She could clearly see the brocade vest, and there, just barely visible even in the enhanced image, was a thin line above his left eyebrow. The scar. How is this possible? She muttered, standing up to pace her small office. Bodies don't just get up and walk away. Her phone buzzed. A text from her colleague, Marcus, a fellow historian specializing in frontier lawmen. "You're in early? Coffee?" Sarah glanced at the clock. It was 7:30 in the morning. She'd been working for 12 straight hours. She texted back, "Need your help with something big." 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived with 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. "You look terrible," he said. "Thanks," Sarah replied, gesturing at her monitor. "Look at this." She walked him through her discovery. The censored photograph, the enhancement process, the identification of John Wesley Cooper. Marcus studied the images carefully, his coffee forgotten. "You're sure it's him? The vest, the scar, the face, everything matches perfectly." Marcus leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "So either someone faked Cooper's death, or there's a case of mistaken identity in the historical record." "That's what I've been thinking all night," Sarah said. "But why? Why would anyone fake the death of a relatively minor frontier figure?" "Maybe he wasn't so minor," Marcus suggested. "What if Cooper was involved in something that required him to disappear? You said he worked as an informant sometimes." Sarah nodded slowly. "I need to see the burial records from Boot Hill, and I need to find out who else was in that saloon the day this photo was taken." Over the next week, Sarah worked with an intensity that surprised even herself. She requested records from Dodge City, contacted the Boot Hill Museum, and reached out to descendants of people mentioned in connection with Cooper's death. The burial records confirmed what the newspaper had reported. John Wesley Cooper died March 8, 1885, buried March 10th, plot number 247. The undertaker's notes described the body. Male, approximately 34 years old, 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, wearing brocade vest. But Sarah also found something interesting in the undertaker's personal diary, preserved by his great-great-granddaughter in Oklahoma. March 9th, 1885. Strangest thing. Marshal Kane brought in Cooper's body from the saloon shooting. Face was badly damaged. Could barely recognize him. Kane seemed certain of the identification, though. Relied on the vest and personal effects. Buried him quickly, before sunset the next day. Sarah highlighted the passage. Face was badly damaged. She called Marcus immediately. The body was identified by clothing and personal effects, not by facial features. What if it wasn't Cooper at all? Then who did they bury? Marcus asked. "I don't know, but I'm starting to think Cooper staged his own death. The question is why, and what was he doing in Deadwood 6 months later?" Sarah's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. James Whitmore's personal journals, discovered in a storage unit in Colorado Springs by his descendants, who'd recently donated them to the Historical Society. Whitmore had been a prolific photographer in the Dakota Territory, documenting daily life in mining towns throughout the 1880s. His journals contained detailed notes about each photograph, the subjects, the locations, and sometimes personal observations. Sarah found the entry for September 14, 1885, the day he photographed the Silver Dollar Saloon. Took interior shots of the Silver Dollar today. Owner paid well for commemorative photographs of his establishment. Interesting collection of characters present. At corner table, recognized a man I'd photographed 2 years prior in Dodge City, John Wesley Cooper, who I'd heard had died in a gunfight last spring. Asked him about it directly. He smiled and said, "Some men are harder to kill than others." Didn't elaborate. Noticed he kept watching the door nervously throughout the session. Whatever business brought him to Deadwood, He didn't want to be found. Sarah read the passage 3 times, her heart racing. Whitmore had recognized Cooper. The photographer knew the man was supposed to be dead. She continued reading. Cooper asked me not to include him in any public displays of the photographs, offered me $20, a substantial sum, to ensure his face wouldn't be identifiable in any prints distributed. I agreed. Man seemed desperate for anonymity. Later heard from Saloon owner that Cooper left town that very night, heading north toward Montana territory. So Whitmore had been paid to obscure Cooper's identity. That explained the original censorship. It hadn't been added by scandalized archivists decades later, but by the photographer himself, at Cooper's request. But why? What had brought Cooper to Deadwood under an assumed identity, and why the elaborate staging of his death 6 months earlier? Sarah pulled up maps of the Montana territory from 1885. Several mining operations, cattle ranches, and frontier settlements dotted the region. But one location caught her eye: Fort Benton, a major trading post and military installation. She began searching for connections between John Wesley Cooper and Fort Benton. Sarah's research led her to a surprising connection: a memoir published in 1932 by a woman named Catherine O'Brien, daughter of a Deadwood saloon owner. The book, titled Frontier Childhood Growing Up in Deadwood, had a small print run and was largely forgotten. Sarah found a digitized copy in the library archives and began reading. Most of it was standard frontier reminiscence, stories of miners, gamblers, and occasional violence. But one chapter, titled The Quiet Man, caught her attention. Catherine O'Brien wrote, "In September of 1885, when I was 12 years old, a man came to my father's saloon, the Silver Dollar. He was different from the usual rough characters who frequented the establishment. He spoke softly, dressed well, and had the careful manners of an educated person. He stayed only one night, playing cards with 2 other men in the back corner. I remember him because he gave me a silver dollar, an enormous sum for a child, and told me to remember that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is walk away from a fight. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. Years later, my father told me the truth. The man was running from something, or perhaps towards something. He'd paid my father to keep quiet about his presence in Deadwood. My father, who had his own complicated past, understood the need for discretion." Sarah read the passage again, then continued. "The man left that very night, after a photographer came to take pictures of the saloon. I never saw him again, but I never forgot his kindness or his sad eyes. My father said his name was John Cooper, and that he was trying to outrun a ghost." Sarah grabbed her phone and called Marcus. "I think I know what happened. Cooper didn't just fake his death. He was running from something, or someone." "What makes you think that?" Marcus asked. "Everything," Sarah said. "The staged death, the fake burial, the quick departure from Deadwood, the payment to ensure anonymity. He was hiding. From who? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Sarah's next discovery came from the most unlikely place: a routine property transfer document from Dodge City, dated April 1886, more than a year after Cooper's supposed death. The document recorded the sale of a small ranch outside Dodge City. The seller, Thomas Kane, former marshal. The buyer, a mining company based in Montana. Sarah stared at the screen. Thomas Kane was the marshal who had identified Cooper's body. And 13 months after Cooper's death, Kane had left Dodge City, sold his property, and disappeared into Montana territory. She pulled up everything she could find on Kane. He'd been marshal of Dodge City for 6 years, well respected, known for his integrity. And then, suddenly, he resigned in April 1886, sold everything, and vanished from the historical record. Sarah found one final mention of him, a newspaper article from the Miles City Monitor in Montana, dated July 1886. Former lawman Thomas Kane has taken a position as chief of security at the Northern Mining Company operations near Fort Benton. Kane, who served as marshal of Dodge City, Kansas, said he was seeking a quieter life away from frontier violence. "Fort Benton?" Sarah whispered. "The same area where Cooper had fled." She mapped out the timeline. March 1885. Cooper's death is staged in Dodge City. Marshal Kane identifies the body. September 1885. Cooper appears in Deadwood, 400 miles away, using obvious precautions to hide his identity. April 1886. Kane resigns and moves to Montana, near Fort Benton. July 1886. Kane takes a security job at a mining company in the same region. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place, but the full picture remained frustratingly unclear. Had Kane been part of the plan to fake Cooper's death? Were they working together? And what were they protecting or running from? She needed more information about the Northern Mining Company and what had been happening in Montana Territory in 1885 and 1886. Her search led her to geological surveys, mining claims, and financial records. And there, buried in a quarterly report from 1886, she found it. The Northern Mining Company reported discovery of significant gold deposits in previously surveyed areas. Security concerns necessitated additional personnel due to competing claims and potential criminal activity. Sarah spent the next 3 days piecing together fragments from multiple sources: mining company records, federal marshal reports, newspaper accounts from small Montana towns, and personal letters preserved in various historical collections. The story that emerged was far more complex than a simple faked death. In early 1885, the Northern Mining Company had made a massive gold discovery in Montana Territory, potentially one of the largest strikes since the California Gold Rush. But the company faced a problem. Word of the discovery would trigger a rush of prospectors, legitimate miners, and criminals, overwhelming their ability to secure the claim and causing chaos in the region. They needed to keep the discovery secret while establishing legal claims and proper security, a process that would take at least a year. But information had leaked. By February 1885, rumors of a major strike were circulating in frontier towns from Denver to Dodge City. Dangerous men were already moving north toward Montana, following whispers of gold. The mining company approached federal authorities with a proposal: help us maintain secrecy and security, and we'll cooperate fully with territorial law and pay substantial taxes on our operations. The federal government agreed and assigned 2 men to the task: Marshal Thomas Kane, known for his discretion and competence, and John Wesley Cooper, who had worked as an undercover informant for federal marshals on multiple occasions. Cooper's assignment was dangerous. He needed to infiltrate the criminal networks planning to exploit the gold discovery, gather intelligence, and report back to Kane. But to do so effectively, he couldn't be a known associate of law enforcement. He needed to be dead. Sarah found the confirmation in a collection of federal marshal correspondence, recently declassified. Agent Cooper's cover has been established. Death staged successfully in Dodge City. Cooper will operate under assumed identity, gathering intelligence on criminal operations, targeting Montana Territory mining interests. Marshal Kane will coordinate security operations from Fort Benton. The letter was dated March 15, 1885, exactly 1 week after Cooper's supposed death. Sarah sat back, amazed. Cooper had been working undercover for the federal government, protecting a gold discovery worth millions of dollars. But the mystery remained. Why had the photograph been censored? The answer came from an unexpected phone call. A woman named Elizabeth Kane had seen Sarah's online research query about Thomas Kane and reached out. "Marshal Kane was my great-great-grandfather," Elizabeth explained over the phone. "My family has a collection of his personal papers. I heard you were researching him. Would you be willing to share those papers?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can do better than that," Elizabeth said. "I can send you his private journal." He kept detailed notes about his time in Montana. 3 days later, a package arrived at the Historical Society. Inside was a leather-bound journal, remarkably well-preserved, filled with Kane's neat handwriting. Sarah found the relevant entries quickly. September 1885. Cooper's cover has been compromised. His presence in Deadwood was observed by hostile parties connected to the Slade Gang. Photographer Whitmore was instructed to obscure Cooper's identity in any photographs taken that day. Cooper departed immediately for Fort Benton. His intelligence regarding the gang's plans has been invaluable. October 1885. Operation successful. Slade Gang apprehended before they could reach the mining sites. Cooper's information prevented what could have been a violent confrontation. Gold discovery secured. Company can now proceed with legitimate development. November 1885. Cooper has requested to remain dead officially. After 2 years undercover work, he wishes to start a new life away from frontier violence. I support his decision. His service deserves that peace. And then a final entry from December 1885. Today I attended the wedding of John Cooper, using the name Robert Morrison now, to Anna Bergstrom, daughter of a Fort Benton merchant. He seems genuinely happy. Sometimes the greatest reward for service isn't recognition, but the chance to simply live. I've recommended all official records remain sealed for 50 years to protect Cooper's new identity. Sarah closed the journal carefully, her eyes wet with tears. Cooper hadn't been running from justice. He'd been earning the right to disappear into a peaceful life. The photograph had been censored not to hide scandal, but to protect a man who'd risked everything for his country. Sarah's research culminated in an article for the Journal of Western History, meticulously documenting John Wesley Cooper's undercover work and the photograph that had preserved evidence of his survival. But before publication, she made one more phone call to a family in Montana she'd discovered during her research. They were descendants of Robert and Anna Morrison. "We always knew there was something mysterious about our great-great-grandfather," said David Morrison, age 72, speaking from his ranch near Fort Benton. Family stories said he'd had a different life before Montana, but he never spoke about it. "We thought maybe he'd been an outlaw who'd reformed." "He was a hero," Sarah said gently, explaining what she'd discovered. She visited David and his family 3 weeks later, bringing copies of all her research. They sat in the Morrison family's living room, surrounded by photographs spanning 5 generations. David showed Sarah a photograph of Robert Morrison from 1890. The same distinctive features, the same thoughtful eyes as the man in the censored Saloon photograph, but now relaxed, at peace, surrounded by his wife and 3 young children. "He lived to be 78, David said. "Died in 1929, respected pillar of the community. Never caused any trouble, helped build the first school in Fort Benton, served on the town council. My grandmother said he was the kindest man she ever knew." Sarah held the photograph carefully, thinking about the journey this man had taken, from the violence of frontier towns to the peace of family life, purchasing that peace with his courage and his willingness to disappear. "There's one more thing," David said, reaching into a cabinet and pulling out a small wooden box. Inside was a brocade vest, carefully preserved, and a silver dollar coin from 1885. "This was his," David said. "He kept them his whole life. My grandmother said he told her once that they reminded him of the person he used to be, and the choice he'd made to become someone better." Sarah touched the vest gently, the same vest visible in both the Dodge City records and the Deadwood photograph, the physical thread connecting all the pieces of Cooper's story. "Your article," David said. "When it's published, will people finally know the truth?" "They will," Sarah promised. "And they'll know that sometimes the bravest thing isn't facing death, it's choosing life." That evening, Sarah sat in her office looking at the censored photograph one final time. What had seemed like a cover-up was actually an act of compassion. Whitmore and Kane working together to protect a man who'd earned his anonymity. She thought about the words Catherine O'Brien had remembered. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is walk away from a fight. John Wesley Cooper had done more than walk away. He'd built a new life, raised a family, contributed to his community, and died peacefully, surrounded by people who loved him, never knowing that a century and a half later, a historian would uncover his secret and honor the sacrifice he'd made. The photograph, once censored to protect him, now stood as a testament to his courage. Sarah began writing the final paragraph of her article. In the end, the censored photograph from the Silver Dollar Saloon reveals not scandal, but nobility. The story of a man who gave up his identity, his recognition, and his very existence in official history to serve his country, and earn the right to simply live in peace. The black bar across that image wasn't hiding shame. It was protecting grace. She saved the document and looked out her window at the Denver skyline, thinking about hidden histories waiting to be discovered, and the quiet heroes whose stories deserve to be told. The rain had stopped. Tomorrow she would share Cooper's story with the world.